Hi, this is Allison with Pictures and Stories. And in this video, I wanted to show you a little bit about the process of choosing which stories to write about from your lifeline and how to flesh out your story notes on the story notes card. And I thought the best way to do this would be to show you how I'm going to do it with my own lifeline for my own storybook that I'm working on right now. I have my lifeline here that I've been brainstorming. Now, if I wrote a story about every item on my lifeline and my brainstorming pages, it would probably be way too much. I don't want my book to be 800 pages long. So what I'm going to do is prioritize what I want to write about, and then I'll write expanded story note cards on my chosen stories so that then I'll be ready to start writing my stories. First of all, I'm going to go back and read my written statements of purpose, audience, and scope, just so I have them fresh in my mind, because they'll help me decide what stories I want to write about. I'm going to quickly scan over the notes that I've written on my lifeline. Now, don't overthink this. You should be moving through this exercise fairly quickly so your subconscious can do its magic. You can always change your mind later about what stays in or gets left out. So look at your lifeline. And what's the first thing that jumps out at you as something that just cannot be left out of this memoir? Circle it. Ask yourself these questions about the note that you have just circled. First, does this story fragment fit with my stated purpose, audience, and scope? Here's an item that may fit my purpose and audience, but it doesn't fit the limited scope of this project. This circled item was an important event in my life, but it doesn't really fit this particular theme, so I'll set it aside to use in a future volume. The second question is, why is this incident or story important enough to include in this history? Is it entertaining, uplifting, interesting, thought-provoking? Does it teach a lesson? Is it important for your reader to know? In other words, what is the point of this story? If you know that it's important but you can't quite put your finger on the point of it, circle it anyway. The purpose of this story will probably come to you later, and if not, you may decide later that it's not really worth including anyway. I'm going to scan over my lifeline again, and I'm going to pick the next most important thing that jumps out at me and circle it. I'm going to ask myself the same questions. Does it fit my purpose, audience, and scope? Why is it worth including? I'm going to continue this process until I've circled everything that definitely should not be left out of this memoir, and some things I'm not quite sure about. I can decide for sure about the more ambiguous items later. I'm not going to worry about putting these in any sort of order yet. I'll figure out the order of my stories later in step 6. Now, on my lifeline, I have quite a few random snippets that don't necessarily make a story in and of themselves. I'm going to circle them anyway if I feel like they should be included. For instance, one item that I circled is the fact that my mom used to use a lot of Yiddish phrases in her everyday conversation, even though she was raised Protestant and had no Jewish relatives. Where did that come from? It's an entertaining detail, but it doesn't necessarily have a story behind it. But I know I want to include it somewhere, so I'll circle it on my lifeline and see if I can work it into another story about my mother that fits into the scope of this memoir. Now that I've circled everything I want to include for this project, I'm going to start organizing them into story segments using the story notes cards. Creating story segments is a way to break down this overwhelming task of creating a personal history into smaller, friendlier pieces. So before I sit down and begin to write my stories, I'm going to combine some of my circled notes together and take a few more detailed notes of my chosen story ideas. This will make it much easier to write my story later on. So now I'm going to look over my circled items on my lifeline and pick up a blank story note card. I'm going to randomly choose any circled item from my lifeline. You don't have to worry about any particular order at this point. Any item will do. In fact, as I'm looking at these two circled items, I realize that they are really related, kind of part of the same story about my funny experiences in junior high drama club. I'm not sure about a title yet, so I'll leave the title at the top blank for the moment. I'm also not quite sure what the point is yet, so I'll leave that blank too. So now I'm going to just start making notes of whatever I can remember about this incident in short phrases. I'm not beginning to really write anything yet. I'm just jotting down whatever I can remember about it so that I have enough elements to help me recall the story when I begin to write the first draft. Also, if I need to do any research for this story, like look something up in my yearbook or call a family member to see what they remember, now would be the time to do that. As I write about this experience, I begin to see what the point of this story is, that I had found a talent that helped me through my awkward teenage years. So I write in a working title at the top and the point of the story, which is, I find a talent and come out of my shell. Humiliation leads to success. By the way, no one else is going to read this, so don't censor yourself. This part of the process is just for you. Now I'm going to continue taking notes on the back side of the card. If I run out of room on the story notes card, I can continue onto an index card or a sheet of paper and clip it to the card. If I run out of story notes cards altogether, I can just photocopy more of them. Now that I've finished this card, I'll find the next circled note on my lifeline and start a new card. I'll continue this way until I have fleshed out all the circled items on my lifeline and I have a stack of completed story note cards. If I have random circled items left over, I'll see if they can be combined into another story, or I may just decide that they don't really fit anyway and leave them out. There, now I'm done with my story note cards and I'm now ready to start writing my first draft. And if you want to see how the card in this example became the story in my book, you can read the first part of the story in the guidebook in step 5.